According to a new report released by U.S. Central Command, in 2019, American warplanes dropped a record-breaking 7,423 bombs and other munitions in Afghanistan. The figure represents a major escalation in the U.S. air campaign. It is the highest number in a decade. The Pentagon is reported to have begun keeping tabs on such attacks in 2006. In comparison, 10 years ago, during the era of President Barack Obama, 4,147 bombs were dropped on the war-torn country. Despite invading Afghanistan in 2001 to topple the Taliban, the massive bombing campaign has not hampered efforts by the militant group to recapture more territory. So can Washington find a way out of the war by dropping more and more bombs?
What we're seeing here is the classic United States strategy that it inherited from Great Britain when Great Britain used to terrorize the Middle East with bombing campaigns. As soon as they had aircraft that could carry bombs, they were going to obliterate a village, spread terror throughout the population, and then cause them to surrender. That's been the strategy ever since. Nothing has changed. The Americans used this strategy in World War II to terrorize the civilian population. Didn't work there, lengthened the war. Then they used it again in North Korea. It didn't work there because North Korea, they destroyed every single building in North Korea.
Under the administration of US President Donald Trump, the rules of engagement have been loosened. It means commanders on the ground have the authority to call in airstrikes. Critics say this has contributed to the surge in the air raids. However, it has also been accompanied by an increase in civilian fatalities.
No, as I said, it's always been the strategy. There are, in effect, no military targets in Afghanistan. If by military target it means something that is fixed, that is clearly identified as a military base or military emplacement, they don't exist. The Taliban moves around, they move into caves, and they are close to civilian populations, so you're naturally going to be bombing civilian populations in order to get at the Taliban, which means you're going to have civilian categories.
According to the United Nations, in the first 3 quarters of 2019 alone, Washington had been responsible for some 575 Afghan civilian deaths from violence. The UN has repeatedly expressed concerns over the spike in US airstrikes across the country. Some experts say the US is heavily bombing Afghanistan to gain some kind of leverage in the ongoing talks with the Taliban. At the same time, the Taliban is also increasing its levels of attacks, which are all leading to an increasing level of violence across the country. Rights groups say the victims in all this are none other than Afghan civilians. Critics are questioning if this is the way forward to end the war. Does President Trump have a clear policy for Afghanistan, or is the White House just using air raids to pressure the Taliban during negotiations with the militant group?
Trump's strategy in the Middle East was to withdraw from the Middle East. He can't do that because the military commanders will not let him. And so he reverts to whatever they want to do. And so we're back to that same default setting. It's not a strategy, it's a default setting. It's what they know how to do. They know how to drop bombs from airplanes. They kill civilians, they don't really get at the heart of the problem. Once the army goes underground, they can't reach them, but that's what they do.
During 2019, the Trump administration did make some very hard-fought progress in talks with the Taliban. At one point, Trump abruptly cancelled the negotiations, only to resume them just several weeks ago. However, critics say any long-lasting peace in the country cannot be achieved through negotiations between the US and the Taliban alone. One of the most vocal critics of these negotiations has been Iran. Tehran says for the talks to be successful, they must involve Afghanistan's government.